Good afternoon. My name is Martin Coss, and this is my Tableau 2 project. So without further ado, let's get right into the data. So before I even brought the data over into Tableau, I decided to mess with a couple filters in Excel and try to see if I could find any patterns right off the bat. I did notice, or I did take note of the departments, canoes, kayaks, and paddle boards, as well as the items within those departments. It kind of gave me the clue that this might be data from a retailer such as Cabela's or something, because I also noticed that they have sales in 48 states, and I believe Cabela's is one of the only outdoor retailers that does service 48 different states. But besides that, I tried to check or filter out rather some of the data to see if there are any negative profits, and I didn't notice any of that. Either just wasn't in there or wasn't reported. I only found like 6 or 7 negative amounts. So I figured that wasn't going to be a big part of the project. I'd have to go a different route. So right around then is when I added the data, and I figured I'd kick it off with a stacked bar chart here. I wanted to compare the profits and sales, see if there were any patterns, irregularities, just kind of compare the two. Obviously, 2019 and 2020, compare the 2 years side by side as well. And we've got all the items down at the bottom, the departments up top. And I did notice a couple patterns here. For instance, let's see, we've got the West Coast. They clearly fancy the paddle boards. I mean, when I think of California, I think you're just doing leisurely activities, nothing too crazy, nothing too intense. So paddleboarding is right up their alley. Whereas you've got the East Coast with like the kayaks and the canoes and such. They have really great whitewater rafting out there, whitewater kayaking. So I can see where these trends start to take place. But other than that, no major difference between the sales and profits. So what I did notice, however, was the canoes sales and profits were both just terribly low, and that's aside from Pelican, the Pelican model. So we're just going to be taking a deeper dive into Cascade and Boston Tender, and that's what I did here with the second worksheet. I filtered out all the kayaks, all the paddle boards. So we're just looking at canoes, and then I also filtered out Pelican as well, just because they seem to be pretty well off with those sales and those profits as well. So we're looking at the patterns here, and it looks like off the bat there were some particular areas that had some decent profits. New York specifically, California, I can see that happening. But then right when 2020 hits, everything just trails off, and you don't see any profits at all. I'm not sure if these are realistic. If this is realistic data, maybe this probably has something to do with COVID, I would imagine. Or I don't know, they just tanked. Nobody wanted these items anymore. But there are some patterns to notice here. Obviously, like I said, New York, and we're looking at California. But even among these smaller profits here, I noticed, where are we looking at it? Wyoming. Well, it's not picking it up there, but Wyoming does have a huge profit margin. And I actually get into it in this next map here. See there, 850,000, that's right up there with a lot of the other big ones. Texas, you're thinking Pennsylvania, Illinois, New York as well. But what I really wanted to do here, I noticed there was a lot of location-centric data in the last couple of worksheets, so I figured a map was going to be necessary just for a little just something eye-catching, something easier to look at. easy to follow here. And then, of course, I have I've got the filter here. If you take off 2019 from the canoes, and then you just look at 2020, there's already like 10 to 15 states missing. Now there's like half the states are missing. So they're not only making very few sales in the states they're in, but they're just not hitting all the states in general. So big tail off in the end, or from 2019 to 2020, however. And I did want to take a note of that with this next worksheet. So I did. I entered in a custom calculated field. If you can see it over here, profit difference. With 2019 here, there's no frame of reference, obviously, because we don't have 2018 data. So that's just straight yellow. But this is the difference in those 2 years, as with 2019 as a frame of reference. And you do notice three major patterns here. So the two, New York and California, are really red because of the insane profits they had in 2019 that just didn't translate to 2020. And then you have Wyoming, who they had no profits at all, and then all of a sudden they're just booming. So these three states in particular, since they're such outliers, I kind of wanted to take a closer look at those as well. And this was kind of just the last tidbit. See if I can get any last bit of information before I jump into the dashboard and the story. I swapped I usually have the profits as the color coder here, but I swapped it so the sales would be there, and that really singled out New York as just the top seller with 18,000 units in 2019. And if you look around, nobody's even coming close. 120 units, just under 4,000, 167. So it's a striking difference. And then you look at the dashboard here. I wanted to have just in an interactive way. I took the canoe profits map, combined it with the regional sales and profits bar chart here, the side-by-side bar chart, just so I can see if I can click on California here. Yep, and that'll show you just neither of the Cascade or Boston Tender items had any sales there, and then you see just major sales from Boston Tender here. You can scroll back up, reset this. You look at Wyoming here. Looks like Cascade made all that profit. Boston Tender made all that profit. Cascade had a little piece of it as well, but they did all of it with not as many sales, which is impressive. Go back up. And then that brings us to all right. So that's the story comes next. Started with canoe sales and profits, and I wanted to kick off the story with just your basic data that gives you all the information. Of course, it's filtered down to just canoes because that's what I wanted to get into. But I guess the point of this story would be that I want to try to pinpoint the exact, as precise as we can get with what went wrong with the sales and the profits from Cascade and Boston Tender. So maybe if we can get even more and more specific as the story goes along, we'd be able to pinpoint those. Perhaps look back on what our marketing practices were, what our business practices were at that time, and try to replicate that to maybe salvage those locations at the very least. Maybe try to implement that into other locations as well, other regions. But yeah, I wrote here sales and profits for the canoes department, filtered for Cascade, Boston Tender, and then try to salvage these struggling items. So we go to the next one. And then I just labeled this as profit outliers because this is where I started to get a look at California, Wyoming, and New York and such. And this is actually the dashboard, copy and pasted here. And I also included, I've got the slider here with the 3 different options. So you can look at 2019, and it'll change as well. Look at 2020, so you can kind of compare and contrast and see the bar graph will change as well with that. Change that back. All right. Then we're looking at cities of interest next, because once I started to pinpoint the states that I wanted to look at, I just filtered those out. So you can see at the top here, I've got New York, California, and Wyoming as well. And you scroll down to the bottom, and you can see, of course, New York is just taking the cake with the profits, but it looks like California for Boston Tender as well, and then you've got Cascade with the New York space as well, and then Boston Tender's got that New York profits as well. So I wanted to pinch that down even further and look at quarterly sales. So perhaps we can look at a single particular quarter, 1 or 2 quarters, and just think what we were doing at that time. So we've got, let's see, this is from Cheyenne, Wyoming. That's the actual city that all those profits were happening in for the Boston Tender model. And then we've got it's New York City is where the Boston Tender profits were happening in New York. And then if we scroll down here for Cascade, LA is where most of their profits were happening. So I wanted to kind of single those 3 out in the further slides. And this is where I excluded, oh yeah, put it right here, all but the best quarterly profit instances from the Cascade Canoe model. So you can just look at Cascade, see which quarters were best and which locations, and these trumped all the other locations. So I really think my recommendation, and then I've got the Boston quarterly best profits and sales as well. But I think my best recommendation would probably be to, if it's not possible to just halt sales of these 2 models because they just don't look profitable at all, they don't look like they're gaining any traction, nobody's trying to buy them at the time, no sales, no profits, I think it's just run its course. But if that's not possible, then, like I said before, just try to hone in on the best business practices that were happening during the quarters that we were having the best luck, or sorry, the best success with those. And then maybe we can move on from there. Other alternatives, maybe just look at some other models instead of the Cascade and the Boston. Or you could put all of your resources into promoting the Pelican, because that seems to be profitable as well. But that being said, overall, my experience with Tableau, it's been fun, a bit of an all-nighter, but I learned a ton. I know this is going to be a great tool for my arsenal, because I've been hearing that I'm going to have to use this a few more times before I leave college, before I leave USF. So I'm looking forward to it now that I actually have the knowledge. It's pretty exciting. But, well, thank you so much for your time, and I appreciate it. Thanks for all your help this semester.